On this episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast, we've got Dr. Judd Burton with us again today. He's a real cool dude. He's got a lot of fancy doctorate thingies and learned. He's really learned. That's a great way to put it. But
Gobekli Tepe is a site in southeastern Turkey.
It's like, was this civilization pre-flood? I mean, does it kind of go back into that point of pre-flood, and were they possibly, would they be worshiping, the sons of God that came?
Would you like to know what the 37th parallel is colloquially referred to as in the United States?
Go for it.
UFO Alley.
Oh, really?
That's what it seems like. They found something and they don't want people to know about it. And, or hiding it or something. Yeah. What do you think they found?
Well, I think that they're closer to
Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
So, starting the podcast is always awkward, and I haven't really quite figured out how to do it. But you know who we got with us today? We've got Dr. Judd Burton with us again today. He's a real cool dude. He's got a lot of fancy doctorate thingies and learned. He's really learned. That's a great way to put it. But we kind of started talking just a minute ago about his book that came out. When did it actually come out, Judd? Was it? It's fairly new.
Came out Christmas Eve last year, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so he's got Christmas Eve of last year. He's got his new book. We'll say new book. I'm showing it to everybody who can't see it because this is an audio medium, right? But Decoding Gobekli Tepe.
There you go.
Okay,
I was going to say what's it called, but you just said it. So perfect.
Decoding Gobekli Tepe, Biblical Anatolia and the Watchers. It's a pretty neat book. I'm about halfway through it right now, and so I probably can only ask questions on the first half, and then Judd's gonna throw some hardcore stuff that's in the back half, and I'm gonna be like, I'm not there yet, Judd. So, but I guess to start us off is Dr. Burton. Do you just want to tell us what Gobekli Tepe is? Kind of just maybe a quick overview or something.
Sure. Gobekli Tepe is a site in southeastern Turkey, right on the border of Syria, and it is really part of a cluster of sites, but it was one of the first in this cluster of sites that had evidence of city-state dwelling. And what we might classify as a civilization or civilized living millennia before it was supposed to have begun. So in the modern country of Turkey, or Turkey, as they are saying now, this late Mesolithic, early Neolithic site has really sort of shattered a lot of paradigms and preconceived notions about when civilization began and what exactly were the catalysts, in fact, for the earliest of civilization. So to back that up before getting into any other details, suffice to say, for the time being, Gobekli Tepe is it's very, very clearly a religious center. In other words, you had people coming from all around to this place to worship the what were probably the earliest anthropomorphic gods in structures. So these are the really the first temple or temple complex, you could say, can be found at Gobekli Tepe. Is striking, dating back to the middle of the 11th millennium BC. So we're talking about 10,500 BC in terms of its earliest phase of construction. And for the longest time, scholars thought that the earliest of civilizations began in ancient Samaria, ancient Egypt, and the Indus River Valley civilizations like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, all of those dating to the mid to the early part of the fourth millennium BC. Well, here we've got in a site like Gobekli Tepe and some of its sister sites like Novoli Chari and Karahan Tepe, you have city states basically that date back to um, as much as 6 or 7 thousand years earlier than what historians and archaeologists and anthropologists had previously rested on in terms of the dating for the earliest civilizations. And the entire process, the mechanics of the emergence of civilization changed with the discovery and subsequent excavation of these sites that are topical on your show tonight. But as I pointed out a minute ago, scholars had basically had a consensus about what it took for civilization to emerge, to be able to separate itself in terms of classification from, hunter-gatherers or horticulturalist professions that humanity had largely been comprised of for most of its history. And so there's this sharp 90-degree angle change in the cultural trajectory of humanity at this time.
Mm-hmm.
But scholars and scientists thought that it took agriculture to be the catalyst for the kind of society-wide sedentarism necessary for population to build up, stratification of that society to emerge, politics, religion, government. Yeah,
I heard a kind of an idea about how, people started farming, and then when they started farming, they started thinking, and they just coming up with this because they had more time to think.
Right.
Right. Is that kind of like, is that same kind of idea there?
Yeah, there was a archaeologist, actually one of the templates for Indiana Jones, but he was a real field archaeologist back in the 19th and early 20th century. A guy named Veer Gordon Child. He was a brilliant theoretician and worked really in just a myriad of places all over the place. But Child proposed the Neolithic Revolution, which is basically what we're talking about here. That is this sort of outdated idea looking at the emergence of civilizations. Called it the Neolithic Revolution because of the timing of the emergence of agriculture, and that being the catalyst for all of these other things, that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
That's not what happens at Gobekli Tepe and arguably any of the other cluster sites that are associated with Gobekli Tepe. Religion is the first thing that's set in place at Gobekli Tepe. And agriculture and stratification of society and all of the other classical hallmarks of civilization are epiphenomenal of that. In other words, they are resulting from this religious impetus to build this temple complex. So immediately it shatters this old paradigm of the Neolithic revolutions. In other words, you can't use that as a uniform. In some cases you can, but for the patient zero, the Model X, you can't really use that as a universal model anymore.
Because of Gobekli Tepe.
Because of Gobekli Tepe and its related sites.
And because it just all of a sudden it's like, bam, it's there, and they're doing something completely and totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, from the biblical perspective, you kind of go straight back to, Genesis 6 and the Watchers and those sorts of things. And so I guess one of my first questions, I'm gonna get right to the nitty gritty here. Oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh no, all my question was like, was this civilization pre-flood? I mean, does it kind of go back into that point of pre-flood, and were they possibly, would they be worshiping, the sons of God that came down? Is that kind of where it's lining up here, or am I just, kind of shooting in the dark?
No, that's exactly what Aaron and I are proposing in this book, is that, look, this sort of drastic cultural change, if you look at it in terms of historical precedents or models, a kind of mathematics of history, if you will. If you look for other examples where this degree of drastic change happens in history, always happens from an outside force or an outside influence that typically is far more advanced, far more technologically sophisticated. Its intellectual tradition is millennia old, and it typically doesn't have the best interest at heart of the people that it's affecting. But one of the example that I jumped to in the book is one that the historian Jared Diamond uses in his book Guns, Germs, and Steel. And this kind of world history that he writes, the climax is the clash between the Spanish under Pizarro on the one hand and Atahualpa, the Incan king in South America. So in 1532, these two forces clash essentially. But there were already distal causes to this that had been set in motion long before either Pizarro and his people and Atahualpa and his people met. It has to do with geographical layout of the continents. Eurasia is long east to west, so that meant that when metallurgy and agriculture and those sorts of things emerged, they could go along latitude lines without running into a great deal of variation in weather and climate and geography, and could therefore travel more easily. So, this included, all of the hallmarks of civilization in the old world, pastoralism, metalsmithing, that sort of thing. The continents in the Americas are long, they're long north to south, so it took longer for those civilizing elements to spread from Central America. You had basically every climate and landform on the earth that these things had to travel, so they traveled more slowly. So that meant that humans in the old world had been exposed to millennia of herd animal diseases like smallpox and anthrax and a handful of other things. And so over the millennia, you've got generations that are successively inoculated. Their immune systems are prepared for it, not to mention the high degree of metallurgy and things like gunpowder. All of this stuff is set in motion in the old world thousands of years before Pizarro and Atahualpa meet. And it doesn't mean that one side was braver than the other. It just means that there were all of these things that had happened that had put the old world in a place to conquer the new world that went far beyond political agenda. And of course, the ramifications for the new world is that the culture is literally decimated. It's brought down to the nuts and bolts and is irrevocably changed because of this. If you look in Asia Minor and Anatolia and prehistoric Anatolia for a changing factor of that magnitude amongst humans, you're not going to find it. You cannot logically point to any other population of humans at the time and say that they would have had that degree of technological advancement, intellectual advancement. It's just not there because everybody was hunter-gatherers and horticulturalists of one sort or another, and had been for hundreds of thousands of years at that point. And so you cannot choose from, that equilibrium of human advancement and development. There's no human influence that could bring that about. You have to look to a supernatural explanation.
And so, I was going to ask, I guess it's the Aztecs. I'm going to completely say this wrong. Their god, what is it? Quetzalcoatl or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example.
You got it, Caleb.
Yeah. I nailed that one again, huh? How many cultures out there, like that's an example of, they have these stories of a worldwide flood, and then somebody randomly shows up, and it's not just them. Like I know there's a lot more out there, but that's the one I'm thinking of, where somebody basically just comes up on a boat and then has all this knowledge that they impart on these people, and then they disappear, and that's the kind of story that a lot of cultures have, where this knowledge comes from. So kind of, what do you think about where would these people gain this knowledge? Because I'm looking at
what you're talking about is post flood. That would be the reboot.
Oh, okay.
That would be where I think a second incursion is probably at play. But because Gobekli Tepe's initial provenience is pre-flood, we're looking at the same cabal of Watcher Angels, or at least one that was aligned with the Mount Hermon event. And one of the things that gets covered in the book is those angels knew that Eden, which was not just a garden, but in fact was a country, Eden was somewhere in that region of ancient Anatolia. And that it would be important, in fact, for the very birth of the nation of Israel, because Abraham is called from that region of Anatolia. Abraham is from Haran, which straddles what would today be the modern day region of southeastern Turkey and northern Syria. So they knew enough that this region was not only going to be strategically important to Yahweh, but that if they could weaponize that region in a kind of Tower of Babel kind of event, if they could either overpower or convince the cherub that guarded the gate to Eden to side with them, that they could somehow weaponize this strange place where heaven and earth touched. Because
and kind of for Caleb, context, real quick, just for the people listening that may not know a whole lot about this, kind of where Gobekli Tepe is actually at, which you mentioned just north of Syria, kind of on the border, but like I don't know exactly how far. I'm looking at a map north of Jerusalem, but like if you go to your Bible and flip to the back, like they've always have a map about like the patriarchs and where Abraham went, and basically if you follow like where Abraham journeyed, kind of like you were talking about, this is right in that same area, kind of the northern part of where Abraham could have been near this site, and also like you've mentioned, the garden.
He was at one. That's in his all of this was in his backyard.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and like if you follow the rivers, the Euphrates River, this is not far from the Euphrates River.
That's right. It's very close to the headwaters of the Euphrates.
Yes. So that's kind of gives people listening a good idea of where this is at in context to Abraham, in context to Jerusalem. It looks, if I'm guessing, just 600-700 miles north of Jerusalem, just guessing. So
as the crow flies, yeah.
So I guess. No, go ahead, Caleb.
I was going to say,
the questions rolling up in here, man.
I was just going to say also, it's not too far from, even closer than Jerusalem to there, but to Mount Ararat, and that is where, of course, that's where
Noah's Ark landed, and that you've got the re-peopling, the societalization of human culture. It's easy to kind of peripheralize Turkey or Asia Minor or Anatolia. They're all, you hear me throw those terms around. They all mean the same thing. It's the same region. But in a lot of ways, the biblical narrative begins and ends in Anatolia. it starts with creation in Eden, which is in Anatolia, and in Revelation. So much of what's going on in the book of Revelation is, in fact, John is John is writing on the island of Patmos, which is this little island in the Aegean off the coast of Asia Minor. And it just so happens that the island of Patmos is on the exact same latitude as Gobekli Tepe,
Hmm. Oh,
the 37th
pretty
parallel.
wild right there. Yeah.
Would you like
Huh.
to know what the 37th parallel is colloquially referred to as in the United States?
Go for it.
UFO Alley.
Really?
Oh, okay. So I think I've heard of that. I've heard of that before. Well, I've heard
Hmm
of UFO Alley, but I guess I didn't realize that it was the 37th parallel. And so it's all
hmm
on that same. Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild right there.
So that in of itself is thought provoking and interesting. Um, but circling back, there's so much that is biblically relevant that's going on in Anatolia. I'm always trying to get people to pay more attention to. And there's so much going on right now archaeologically. It seems like there are new discoveries in Turkey almost every week. Some of them having to do with potentially the oldest languages that were ever spoken by people.
Oh.
So I say all that just to say that keep your eye on Anatolia and look at it through the biblical lens.
Would Oh, see, I mean that's just like you, Dr. Burton. It's like you drop like 5 or 6 different things, and I'm like, I got a
I know.
question about this over here. I got a question about that over there. And then he said something about UFO Alley, and so then now I'm like over here, you know. But
hmm
I guess the one I'm gonna land on, at least for my question, my first kind of thought question here is would would these watchers that could have been at Gobekli Tepe, would they have known where the garden was, or were they like looking for it?
I think they had a general idea. My surmise is that they had a general idea of where it was at, which is why Aaron and I in the book, one of the things we argue for is that this was a watcher outpost. Like they were the religious impetus. They're the X factor that we're looking for in this equation about who impacted humanity to make this huge change. And they set themselves up as they have throughout history as the gods that are to be revered by people. Something was clearly going on there. Even the archaeologists like the late Klaus Schmidt, who did so much of the critical groundwork on Gobekli Tepe, um, and many of his peers, they all agree that, and these are people, by the way, who don't have any religious stake in the game. They themselves are often not religious, but they all agree on that the people that built Gobekli Tepe believed that it was a portal to the netherworld.
Ooh.
And so, yeah, the watchers that were active in the region must have known that Eden was close, but their although their knowledge is greater than ours, it's not greater than Yahweh's. So they know enough to be able to prognosticate a rather fuzzy picture, not a perfect picture of the future. So they knew enough because of their celestial origins that they were able to make this outpost there. But ultimately it was a failure.
And one thing for the listeners real quick that aren't super familiar with this, to kind of bring home the point that something definitely was going on, because it went from the archaeologists typically, and correct me, of course, that always thought that basically at this point they would be hunter gatherers and they wouldn't be able to build something like this. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden they dig up, like you said, this site that has in the center of it. And I was looking up the how much they weigh. In the center of it, it has pillars coming up that weigh basically 10 tons each. So these massive 10-ton megaliths, and then in a circle around these 10-ton megaliths are, I was trying to count them for, it's a whole bunch. That way it says 8 tons each. So these massive megaliths that are, so basically went from hunter gatherers to all of a sudden realizing there's this big structure with these massive megaliths that are covered in, and if you look them up, it's pretty neat. There's like all sorts of animals and covered in animals and different symbols and stuff, like you said, worship type symbols. So that kind of drives the point home that something definitely was going on. That, where did people learn how to do this? So,
yeah, I think it's pretty clear that all of the boots on the ground stuff that went on in terms of the construction of the site was largely done by humans. One of the things that the Watchers were is they were teachers, they were culture instructors, and so this knowledge was passed on to them. But I think in order to prove that they were gods and to make humanity subservient, human labor has always been a huge factor in the building of megalithic structures. In other words, you gave the techniques and the technology to be able to do that, the Watcher tech, if you will, to humanity, but they were the workforce that did it. But even with human labor being the mechanism for the construction, it doesn't take away from the importance, the supernatural significance of the site, the kind of supernatural technology that's at work. Is not of human origin. It's from another dimension.
Yeah. One of the things I remember kind of by reading the book, kind of to where I'm at in your book is that Gobekli Tepe was intentionally buried. Was that pre-flood? I mean, was that almost to the point where they buried it maybe knowing that something was coming, or was this post-flood, or how does that all, or did they bury it thinking they could just dig it up at some other point and come back?
Well,
I don't know.
that could have been, and Aaron and I deal with that a little bit in the book. We sort of left that as an open question, but I'm sort of the mind that they kind of had buyer's regret, about the whole thing in the pre-flood world. In other words, they saw the conditions that were brought about, undoubtedly with the presence of the Nephilim in the region, and just the rank wickedness that had happened, and probably felt that they couldn't escape the judgment that was coming. And so to make sure that this never happened again, they buried it purposefully. That is certainly a potential scenario, but it seems to have been recovered in some way, if not at that site, then at another site like it, because we get in apocryphal sources, we get the story of Canaan, who was in the line of Arphaxad and Cush, and therefore Nimrod. But I think it's in Jubilees where he supposedly finds a rock as he's trying to build his own empire. A lot of these early post-flood personages that are mentioned, like in the Table of Nations, they're megalomaniacs. They're a lot of them are empire builders. Of course, Nimrod is at the top of the list, and so that's the sort of blueprint, that this Canaan is cut from. And so he was taught somehow his father knew how to read the Watcher writings, and there were apparently writings that were preserved on rock, because he uncovers some of them, and it specifically recounts that they're on rock, and it basically contained all of the knowledge of the Watchers, and he put it to use for him building this empire. And so at some point, the people that built and maintained and lived at Gobekli Tepe must have realized that this was stuff that humanity was not intended, at least in that manner, to be exposed to.
I, I like how you said buyer's regret. I don't know. I never
Yeah.
really kind of thought about it in like
Hmm.
that sense, but it makes a lot of sense. Like they're here, they see all these great things, they want to attain that, and then they get that, and they see the wickedness that comes from it, and it's kind of like oh oh crap, what did we do? You know?
You know, and are there other examples, which this could be an interesting point, where similar things happen where there's a site like this that was intentionally buried? Because that's something you don't really hear about. I don't know if I've ever heard of another site like that where it was intentionally buried in the same
Well,
manner.
not exactly in the same manner. I mean, on a much smaller scale, you'll run into sites from time to time where people ritually buried something.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so that doesn't seem to be the case at. I mean, at Gobekli Tepe, it was ordered. It was quick, but it was still processual and ordered, and not on a small scale. That's why the buyer's remorse makes me think that that had to be part of the scenario. How bad was it? Well, we get a picture of this both from apocryphal sources and from the canon story in Genesis, that it was so bad that God was ready to wipe the slate clean and start over.
Yeah.
That it was so wicked that people were so caught up in absolute hedonism, bloodshed, complete antinomianism, no law. Plus, you have the presence of the Watchers and the Nephilim, and the Nephilim factor can't be underscored enough, because humanity was suffering too. They had already been subject to the depredations of the Nephilim, if we're to believe Enoch and Jubilees and the Book of Giants and the Genesis Apocryphon and some of the other accounts that we get from the Dead Sea Scroll material. There's something that happens during this time period too, just in terms of conventional prehistory. The megafauna die off,
Hmm.
and there have been any number of theories about why that was the case. Drastic climate change, overhunting. It's probably a combination of factors, but there's also a kind of a missing variable hypothesis that anthropologists have, that there's some unknown component to the rapidity of the demise of the megafauna. Well, what is, for one of these Nephilim, it would take orders of magnitude more caloric intake to sustain them.
I was
So
just about to say giants eat a lot of food.
so
Yeah.
they're of course going to be taking a lion's share of these populations, whether they're mammoths or mastodons, or in the Americas, bison latifrans or bison antiguus, any of these huge gigantic bison. And then when those begin to taper off, the predator megafauna would taper off, like the saber-toothed cats and the short-faced bear and dire wolves and
The
things like
giant
that.
sloths.
Well, giant sloths aren't predators, though.
Yeah. Well, they got eaten out before the predators
Right,
went.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
forget
and
them.
when all of those populations die off, you begin to see the predator megafauna die off too. And so, to my mind, again, the missing variable here is the Nephilim, whose pre-flood remnants would have largely been expunged. It would probably take another program to talk about some of my theories about the material evidence for Nephilim, but we can certainly do that.
Don't worry, don't worry. I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
Episode ideas.
He's on about
Well,
20 right now.
Along with t-shirt, I also have a t-shirt. Buyer's regret is got a t-shirt idea. I got another one. So if I ever do a t-shirt and I use buyer's regret, Judd,
okay.
you're getting locked in.
All right, man. I love it.
I
So
like the idea. Oh, go ahead, Caleb. My bad.
I was going to say, I heard a theory on this, which I know, I already know what your thoughts are. And it doesn't necessarily match up with the biblical text, but I heard a theory that and this would of course mean that this site was post flood. But have you heard the theory where that this was potentially Noah's altar that he built? Have you heard that theory?
I have.
What do you think
Not
about it?
Not entirely sold on it.
Yeah,
Only because of the proximity. I mean, yes, Gobekli Tepe is comparatively close to the Ararat region, but I think you're going to have to look in the Ararat region in Armenia, Eastern Turkey, far Eastern Turkey, that region, for Noah's altar.
And I've kind of got it pulled up. It's at least 300 or 400 miles.
Right.
And I'm just ballparking here, and then even the biblical text says, then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal. That doesn't make it seem like it's this massive megalithic site that Gobekli Tepe is. So, but that was just an interesting theory that I'd heard.
Sure.
And even how much, it's only like 1 or 2% of Gobekli Tepe has actually been excavated, correct?
About 30% of
30%. Okay.
The cluster of sites has been excavated. So yeah, it's a massive complex. It's 300 meters square, so it's not small.
And so have I heard this right, that they're not excavating it anymore for a while?
Well, they've slowed down.
Okay.
Yeah, there's archaeology is always about modern politics too. So without going into too much detail, the decision was made in conjunction between one of the rich patrons of the site, who was also involved with the Ministry of Culture, if I'm remembering correctly, and some sort of NGO like the WEF made the decision to not stop altogether, but to slow excavations, much to the chagrin of Klaus Schmidt's wife, who is also an archaeologist. All of this under the auspices of trying to make the site more accessible for tourists, which I'm all for. Building visitor centers and interpretive centers, that sort of thing. I get that part, but the degree to which they've slowed excavations is puzzling at the very least, and alarming at the worst, because that just doesn't happen on an excavation of a site with the importance of Gobekli Tepe. That would be like if you uncovered some hypothetical site that explained where the Egyptians got their hieroglyphs from. They had this fully formed language at the end of the 4th millennium BC. It just springs up out of nowhere. Well, that is linguistically impossible. It'd be like finding something like that. Oh, their language is actually 8,000 years old. It would be something like that. You would not halt excavations on a site like that, even if you were building interpretive centers and things to make it more accessible for tourists. I get that. But halting the work to that degree it just smacks of some maligned agenda, and I think that's exactly what Mrs. Schmidt has actually articulated in a number of interviews. She's not been happy about that, especially with the sort of mushmouth, half-thought answers for why that's being done. They've been given like, oh, we're saving this for archaeologists 100 years from now or 150 years from now. Well, even with all the archaeology we've already done on this planet, we've only cracked the surface. We haven't uncovered every square inch of the Earth's crust.
It does seem kind of
we
weird.
don't know what we don't know what we don't know, and so it is at the end of a dig season, we'll throw the tarps over what we've found, in terms of features. We would take out diagnostic artifacts to study them, but if excavations are going to continue, you tarp up everything, and then to protect it, you backfill the site, and then when you come back the next season, you remove the dirt, take out the tarp, pick up where you left off. That's pretty standard practice. Well, what they're doing here is backfilling, and then saying, we're not going to continue excavations on the scale that we did before.
Do you think they found something?
That doesn't, yes. And I think it's extremely biblically, they found something that's extremely biblically relevant is what
that's
they
what
found.
It seems like. They found something and they don't want people to know about it, and or hiding it or something. What do you think they found?
Well, I think that they're closer to whatever supernatural technology, whatever the residue of that was left at Gobekli Tepe by the Watchers. I think that they've either found or they're close to finding it.
Oh man, so many questions. Like, I mean, like,
well, because
where do I even start?
You have to understand, guys, that this even if I didn't have a faith dog in this hunt, which I do, I can't separate my Christian faith from my scholarship. But I'm telling you, even if I were your run-of-the-mill agnostic academic, that is not the way that you proceed with a long-scale archaeological project. It just does not happen.
So
unless
they've found something, and I mean, I guess the possibilities are endless. I mean, you could have the language that was spoke, pre-Babel, or you could have Watcher language down there. I mean, there's so much that could be in this site just to cover it up. Well, and I guess move on. I mean, so many questions. So I'm writing them all down.
Well, so what is secular archaeologists that don't have the, that are, say, the atheist or secular archaeologists, I guess, where do they think this knowledge come from, or what are their thoughts on the fact that it's getting covered up and not?
Well, they've expressed, I mean, for the most part, in the reports and papers that have been published on the side, they've expressed that, and it's as you might expect, it's a naturalistic interpretation. But it seems to me that archaeologists are split on what's happening at Gobekli Tepe. You've got I don't want to like break it down into the new generation and the old fuddy-duddies, but that's kind of the line that those of us that learned under the the sort of processual school of archaeology, the cultural resource model, we're just kind of looking at each other like, what's going on here? There's no reason to stop. We need to keep doing this. And the more postmodernized, dare I say, politically manipulable elements in archaeology are right on board with it. Basically saying, well, probably right. Let's save this for a generation down. There's going to be, trust me, in a site, and certainly the cluster of sites, the culture that's represented here, there are going to be generations. If we're around that long, there's going to be generations of work to be done at this site.
Digging on it anyway. I mean,
and another place I just thought of where there's no, like, very little digging happening is around underneath the Dome of the Rock, or the places like that in Jerusalem, where they're like, we're not digging here. I mean, what if, if they dug under the Dome of the Rock and found the Ark of the Covenant or something, that would change. That may not be a good.
It would, but that's also extremely political.
Yeah.
Because that's a site that's.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It would.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't. Short of a miracle, I don't know that something like that could ever happen.
Yeah.
Oh man, I got so many questions to go off here. I don't know which one to ask first. I mean, in all honesty, it's really kind of thinking about just the idea that maybe they found something, along those lines, and that's why they stopped digging, or maybe they found something that completely and totally corroborates. I mean, the other side that I'm thinking too is, what if they found something that really, corroborates, yep, this is pre-flood, this is Genesis 6, this is, biblically accurate, almost saying like, Bible's true, all that sort of stuff. I mean,
well, I mean, the precedent's there for far more extreme measures being taken to hide those sorts of discoveries. Look at what the Bureau of Ethnology did in the 1800s and
Oh,
the early
I,
early 1900s. I mean,
I
and
remember reading about stuff like that. Yeah.
well, that and the Indian wars that were waged against the remaining tribes. I'm still convinced that part of the reason that that was carried out was not just manifest destiny and the greed of a growing empire, but the fact that virtually all of the indigenous peoples that remain, like those that had either died off or had been eradicated, all had stories about giants. In some cases, they had
Wow.
fought
Yeah. Yeah.
wars with them, like the Ute and the Paiute in the West. There was certainly there had to have been old world contact with the New World because they had already been linguistically influenced by even Semitic languages. So the first, by way of example, the first missionaries to the Cherokee were able to communicate with them because they both understood Hebrew.
Oh, see, this is
Yeah,
totally
Dustin's
sideways,
got.
but yeah,
Yeah, you got to tell
I,
us.
I've totally already sent a picture to Judd and Dr. Burton earlier, but it's like I'm in Comanche in this, for those like are listening here not from Texas, Comanche is a small town, central Texas, and they've got
Mhm,
a little, small museum there. And in this museum, there's a rock that's got a depiction of an angel on it and Hebrew writing, and right next to
mhm,
that rock is an oil lamp.
mhm,
And I remember like I was asking the people, what about this? And I mean, they were like, oh, well, that's just a rock that was found in like a cave outside, I think Gorman, Texas, I think's what it was.
mhm,
And it's like, well, and I was standing there with my buddy. Uh, I think he listens to the podcast. It's Brandon. You've met Brandon, right, Caleb? I was standing there with Brandon because he was there. And I was like, Giants, Brandon? Giants? And I started like pointing at it, and he's like, maybe. And it's like, it's just interesting to kind of think about,
mhm,
well, how did this block just wind up in Central Texas?
You know,
mhm.
and
You know?
if you look it up, there have been other rocks found. There was one I found in New Mexico, and there was an article about it, and kind of another deal at a little museum. There's multiple places where Hebrew writing has been found on stones, like
That's not
old,
the
and yeah,
that's not the Los Lunas stone, is it?
that yes, that may have been
Yeah, that
in New
was a forgery.
Mexico.
That's a forgery. It's a fake. Yeah,
Ooh,
I don't know.
it's a recent. See, that was my going to be my caveat is that there are legitimate examples of old world contact before Columbus in the New World, but some of them, a lot of them, are fakes,
our fakes.
and they were done in the between. A lot of them were done in the fakes were done in the 19th century, but
Interesting.
there are examples of Phoenician and maybe see it's hard to distinguish between Phoenician and Paleo Hebrew because they're basically the same language on paper. Um, so you do find what I mean. It's probably Phoenician, but it might be Paleo Hebrew. The Phoenicians were the greatest mariners in the ancient world, so it doesn't surprise me that they would have made it all the way to the Americas.
Yeah.
But I say all that just to say that sort of circling back to extreme measures taken to cover up something. Look at the measures that were taken to cover up basically the history that included a lot of supernatural stuff of the Americas. It's bad enough that the unconscious biological warfare sort of finished off most of the Native Americans,
Yeah.
but because of what they knew corroborated so much of the Bible, they were silenced, and in some cases, genocide was used to finish off the job.
This is probably the most interesting podcast we've ever done right here. So many different tangents. I've got a ton of other podcasts. Caleb, you're just laughing over there.
Yeah,
You know.
you're just
Well,
giggling.
we're probably getting pretty close to the end here. So I guess, Judd,
Hmm.
do you have anything you kind of want to finish with, kind of talking, just kind of bringing it back to Gobekli Tepe, or really wherever you want to? I mean,
Sure,
just kind of something like you got anything you want to kind of leave us with here?
sure. Well, if you want to follow the kind of line of thinking here in the show tonight, grab a copy of the book. It's available on Amazon. Check out our work, uh, Dr. Aaron Judkins and myself, Dr. Judd Burton. Gobekli Tepe, it's not just Gobekli Tepe though. It's really all of Turkey that's really sort of shining archaeologically right now. And so I would encourage people to kind of follow what's going on there. And I post a lot of stuff on Facebook, articles and things like that. And a lot of them are related to Anatolia, Turkey. So that's one way to do is follow me on Facebook. My website is burtonbeyond.net, and follow me on X. I'm going to start putting more YouTube content on, and a podcast of my own just around the corner. Just about got everything I need. But yeah, I would just encourage.
What's it going to be called?
The Z Files.
Ooh,
I like the sound of that.
So yeah, I would just encourage people to pick up the book. It certainly won't be the last book on this topic, because there's still so much material that we weren't even able to put into this book. And I've got some stuff that's kind of, it's related, but it's also kind of peripheral to what we were talking about in Gobekli Tepe. Kind of a broader look at all of Anatolia, not just Gobekli Tepe.
And I'll put a link to the book, to Amazon page or whatever, in the description. And he's also Dr. Burton here's got a ton of also other cool books. He got a really cool Interview with a Giant, right? That's a good one. I think I've talked about that one before. He's also got a really cool one that's on Central Texas. Oh, what's it called? I got it on my shelf somewhere.
Oh, the Paranormal Big Country.
Oh, the Paranormal Big Country, which that was a fun one to read. Me and my dad have read that one, and it's just neat because it's Central Texas.
Hold on to your horses. I've got material for 2 more books, so there'll be a volume 2 and 3 eventually.
I was reading about Coleman the other day, which was real funny because I do a lot of deer hunting, which is just the other side of Lake Coleman, and I was reading about Coleman, and then I was out there, and I was like, "Oh, this is neat. I'm right here in the area." Yeah,
I know that place well.
So cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for talking with us today, Dr. Burton. I have sure enjoyed it, and just like the last time we had you, I had like 45. Now I have like 67 different topics, mainly questions to ask and go for, and I have one T-shirt idea. So, a very productive podcast.
Your T-shirt ideas. You came up with the one beforehand.
Oh yeah, we did. We did. Darn it, Skynet. With that, that's I'm right.
Darn it, Skynet. That's right.
Yeah. Darn it, Skynet. Well, all right. Well, that's probably a good spot to end it. Well, thank you guys for listening, and remember, I'm gonna post a lot of that stuff in the description. And so just like starting the podcast, ending it is just as weird. So, Caleb, do you have anything you want to say to end it, or you good?
I'll end it with a dad joke.
All right. Oh, we didn't do dad jokes. Dang it!
I have a dad joke.
Oh, you do?
You
Let's
do.
hear it.
All right.
I do.
Yeah.
All right. Gird your loins. Brace yourself.
Loins have been girded.
Yep.
What do mermaids wash their fins in?
What?
In Tide, of course.
There you go.
I mean, see, I think a dad joke is the delivery is just as crucial, and I applaud you, Dr. Burton.
Yeah. Okay.
The delivery on that one is perfect.
It's one of those jokes where the actual question, the riddle, is funnier than the answer. That's pretty much correct. Yeah.
And I like it. You're like, of course.
Of course.
That's good.
Well, that's a good spot to end it right there. So, well, cool. Well, thanks, Judd, for hanging out and chatting with us.
Thank you, Dr. Burton.
My pleasure.
I've got a ton of questions now. Thank you guys for listening to Raising the Wild Ones podcast. I know me and Caleb are just a couple of redneck theologians, right? Kind of came up with that term a little while ago, and it's just kind of making us laugh. But that's really just what we are, right? Every single one of us is a theologian. Sit there and just think about the Bible, and me and Caleb are rednecks, so that makes us redneck theologians. And so we just thank you guys for listening to us. And if you want to just give us a holler and let us know about topics you may want to listen to or things you may want to say, or if you have an idea for a guest host, or if you yourself want to be a guest host, just drop us a line. Just let us know. Just give us a ring on the old telly. Actually, not really. We don't have a cell phone number, right? But we do have an email, and you can send us an email, right, at raisingwildonespodcast@gmail.com. There'll be a link for that podcast down in the description. And so just kind of click on that and just let us know what you guys want to hear from us. And we like to hear from you guys too. We like to know what you guys think of our podcast. And so also just tell your friends, share it on social media. Just let people know when you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with your hunting buddies or fishing buddies, just say, hey guys, listen to this podcast. It's these two rednecks and they're kind of weird sometimes, but it's fine because they talk about some cool stuff. And so just let people know, and that's how the word gets out, and that's how it gets shared. So we just thank you guys so much for your support and for listening to us. And yeah, tune in next time for more from the Redneck Theologians.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to reach out and bring you some exciting news. Our Patreon is now live. Patreon is a way to support this podcast so we can keep it going. For $6 a month, which is the cost of a cup of coffee, you get exclusive content that is for members only. This includes special episodes, show notes, and early release of our upcoming episodes. As we grow, more will become available through our membership. Another exciting thing is that we will donate $1 out of the $6 membership fee to missions. This money will go into the hands of missionaries on the ground doing the Lord's work. We are working on this and will hopefully have a podcast episode where we interview the missionary soon, so stay tuned for this. So go to patreon.com/Raising the Wild Ones podcast, or click on the link to our Patreon site in the show notes below. Thank you for supporting this podcast, and God bless.